There was a valley, somewhere between history and eternity, a place not found on maps, for it was never meant to be walked by the living. It lay beneath a gray sky, beneath the silence of centuries, not a silence of peace, but of abandonment. The soil was cracked and scorched, a barren mouth that had not tasted rain in 100 years, and scattered across that forgotten earth where bones, countless bones, dot pale, dot brittle, dot stripped of all memory, some broke, some whole, but all dry. No flesh clung to them, no burial cloth adorned them. There were no markers, no mourners had stood where they fell. They had not died gently, they had been left, slain, scattered, forgotten, not buried, but exposed, not honored, but abandoned, and still they remained, their number vast, their silence louder than any voice. In the distance, the hills held their breath. Above, the sky was made of stone. Not even the wind dared to speak, until the breath of God moved once more. Then he came, not in fury, not in fire, but in vision, and the prophet came with him, not by chariot, not by foot, but by the hand of the Lord, carried across the veil that separates what is from what once was. The prophet did not speak. He looked, and he saw. What he saw was death multiplied, not a single grave, but a nation's ruin, a memory shattered into bone. And the Spirit of the Lord led him through the midst of the valley, through the rib cages and broken skulls, through femurs like pillars fallen, through vertebrae curled like sleeping snakes in dust. Everywhere, fragments of what once walked upright, a people once crowned with breath, now lying beneath the weight of silence. And behold, the bones were very many, and lo, they were very dry. This was not death as men know it. This was obliteration, a forgetting so deep it erased the shape of life itself. The prophet had seen exile. He had seen temples burn. He had tasted the bitter bread of Babylon. But this was deeper. This was the death after death, where even the hope of return had decayed. Then came the voice, not from above, not from around, but from within the silence, a question, ancient, heavy, cutting through time like a blade. Son of man, can these bones live? No answer came at first, not because the prophet did not hear, but because no man born of earth could look upon such ruin and speak of life. There are questions too sacred to answer quickly. There are moments when even the faithful tremble between belief and despair. The prophet did not declare, did not argue, did not reason. He answered with reverence and wonder, O Lord God, you alone know. A whisper. Yet it shook the valley, not because it was loud, but because it was true. Only one could know if breath could return. Only one could remember the names of those bones. Only one could summon life from a graveyard no man dared enter. And so the bones lay still. The dust waited, and the heavens leaned in, as if the story was about to turn. The command came, not from a king, not from the heavens cracking open, but from the one whose breath shaped stars. His voice, calm as eternity, pierced the dust-heavy air. Prophesy over these bones. Say to them, O dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. It was not a suggestion, it was a command. The prophet stood among the ruins and opened his mouth, not to speak his words, but to speak God's. The dust stirred, the silence shivered, the bones, lifeless echoes of a nation, began to move. Bone found bone, ribs rose from the ash, vertebrae clicked into place like divine memory returning. Skulls turned skyward, as if waiting to be filled again. A rattling sound filled the valley, the sound of resurrection. The bones came together, each to its kind. Not chaos, but an order only God could write. Then tendons, flesh, skin wrapping over form, covering the shame of death with the shape of the living. But there was no breath. Bodies stood whole in form, but empty in soul, shells of what could live again. The Lord spoke again, prophesied to the breath, call the four winds, command them, breathe on these slain. The prophet called to the wind to root the breath of God. The wind moved, a whisper remembering Eden. The breath passed over the valley, weaving through skulls and hollow lungs, filling what had been empty. A gasp, a cry, a shudder through the limbs. Breath entered them, not just air, but life. They stood, not as corpses, not as ghosts, but as an army, alive. The valley, once full of despair, now pulsed with a holy hush, the kind that falls when the dead breathe again. The Lord spoke. These bones are the whole house of Israel. They say, our hope is lost. We are cut off. I will open your graves. I will bring you up. I will bring you home, he said with a father's tenderness. I will put my spirit within you, and you shall live, not because they deserved it, but because they were his. And when the word of the Lord went forth, death itself had to step back. And so they stood, not in glory, but in grace, not by sword, but by spirit, an army not forged in war, but summoned from death by the breath of God. The valley was no longer silent, yet no voices spoke. It was the stillness after resurrection, the hush when heaven has passed through earth and left its imprint. The dust no longer choked the air. It glowed, as if the light beneath creation had been stirred from slumber, and the bones, once scattered, now stood shoulder to shoulder, a people reborn, without lifting a hand, without shedding a drop of blood. What weapon could do this? What army could command dry bones? What king, what empire, what prophet could speak into death and be heard? Only one. Only the God who remembers graves. Only the Lord who speaks not to the living, but to the long forgotten. He did not rebuild the temple first. He did not return the land first. He did not silence the enemies first. He breathed, and they lived. This was his answer to despair, to the voice that cried, our bones are dried up. Our hope is lost. We are cut off. No, you are not lost. You are known. You are not beyond reach. You are remembered. And in remembering, he called the wind. Somewhere, beyond the edges of this vision, Israel still sat in exile. The temple was still ash. Jerusalem still a ruin. The people still wept by Babylon's rivers. But the prophet had seen something deeper. He had walked through what should never live again, and seen it rise. He had watched hopelessness stand up and breathe, not as a metaphor, not as a dream, but as a word spoken into reality. The vision faded, but its echo remained, not just in Ezekiel, but in every soul that has known exile, that has felt like dust, that has looked at what once was and said, it's too late. This vision is not just about bones. It is about the God who refuses to forget. What we think is too far gone. The God who speaks. When breath is gone, the God who waits. Where others have walked away. The God who calls the winds. Not to destroy, but to awaken. And now, the echo reaches us. To those lying in silent valleys. To hearts buried under loss. To hopes that have dried out in the sun. The word still speaks. I will open your graves. I will bring you up from them. I will bring you home. Not with noise, not with might, but with breath, with spirit. Not all revivals are loud. Not all victories march. Sometimes resurrection comes, like a whisper through dry bones. And when it does, nothing stays dead.